All right, hello everybody. Welcome. I got another little video sponsored by Squarespace here, and I know y'all do be getting hungry. Me too. So I made you guys some sandwiches. I couldn't help, I already started. So everybody take one, dig in. Let me show you what I've got here. I'm eating one of the pastrami ones. I already ate the pickle from on top. Okay, we got pastrami here, Black Forest ham right here. And then for the people who are a little bit more picky, we've got mustard and bread sandwiches. And of course, I had to get a little bit fancy with, some little pickles and olives on top. I hope you don't mind if I take that one. Maybe someone doesn't want their olive. All right, everybody take one. Take one. Don't be shy. All right, today, of course, we'll be doing some drawing in the little Peter pad that comes with the Peter pen when you get one. Do some doodling there, and then we're going to jump into drawing in this sketchbook that I've been working on. And if I look at this right, it looks like we're about halfway through, which is a good feeling as far as progress goes. It's hard to tell when with these pages because they crinkle up, take up a bit more space once you've drawn on them. But, maybe if not halfway, then like 7/16, something like that. Yeah. All right. Let's draw. Everybody go. Take one. I'll finish this one.
It seems like every time I go to buy a new tube of toothpaste, I get shocked by the flavor because it's so different than the toothpaste I bought before. And you might be saying, Peter, why don't you just buy the same toothpaste you had before? I think in my mind I expect to do that, but every time I forget how many options there are, and when I stand there in the aisle looking at the approximately 127,000 different types of toothpaste, and that's just in the one brand I buy, Crest. And I don't know why I buy Crest instead of Colgate or what other options there are. I think it's just because that's what I was raised using. I get totally overwhelmed by all the options, and I can have no recollection of what I was using before. Something minty, that's all. But there's like about 1,000 different types of mint, too. So then I look at all the different options. There's something for teeth whitening, and there's something for gum health. There's something for cavity prevention. And then there's all these weird combinations of all of those. And then there are other ones that are like 2x teeth whitening, 3x cavity prevention, 4x gingivitis attack. And it makes you think, why would I get the 2x teeth whitening when there's a 3x teeth whitening? And you start wondering if maybe the 3x teeth whitening only exists to sell the 4x teeth whitening. And why would I buy the 4x teeth whitening if there's a 4x teeth whitening that also helps with gum health? And the box has cool holographic graphics. So then I get overwhelmed and I end up at home and the toothpaste tastes weird, but after a couple of days I forget that it's weird and it's normal again until the cycle repeats itself later. Alright, make sure you go check out all the options at Squarespace. All of the website templates are very cool from the get-go. They all look very polished and professional, but most of all, they're very flexible. And I don't mean stretchy flexible, but you can do whatever you want with them, customize them as much as you want, but it's not difficult. All the modules are drag and droppable, expandable. They all just, pretty much you can just do it all with your mouse. Of course, if you're an expert, you can open the little HTML parts of them and start typing things in. But if you're like me with my Squarespace site, I can customize it extensively without having to know a bunch of crazy stuff about websites, and it still looks amazing and does everything I want it to. Plus they have all these cool options for online stores, custom merch, members areas. So go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/PeterDraws for 10% off your first website or domain. So here we're hopping into the next portion of the doodling in my sketchbook. And I'm using a platinum desk fountain pen, and I think it has the platinum carbon ink in it. I've been liking this fountain pen because it's very thin, precise, and it doesn't smudge a lot because it uses that platinum carbon ink, which is pigment based. And I don't know, I'm not an ink expert even after all these years. Whatever it is, you know how I kind of go through phases with pens sometimes. This is the pen I'm enjoying at the moment a lot of the time. Anyways, I wanted to use some of this time to review some of the cool things I've been learning in my art history class about the art of Rome. But the difficulty is there's just so much, and it's difficult to go over a lot of it without visual references, and I don't really want to, throw a bunch of stuff up on the screen, to cover my art. I have priorities here. But anyways, let me tell you a little story. Okay, I'll hit you up with some of it. Once upon a time, there was a king named Numitor, and he was the king of a place called Alba Longa. He had a little brother, and he had a daughter, okay? And then his little brother was jealous that he wasn't the king, so he got rid of Numitor. This little brother was named Amulius, and Amulius became the king, and he was happy with it. But then he realized that Numitor's daughter was a threat, because if his daughter had any sons, then they, could kill him and take the kingdom away, I suppose. So he forced Numitor's daughter to become a priestess, because the priestesses in that day and age weren't allowed to get married or have children. And that was a pretty slick idea, I suppose. But then Mars, in all his godly power and prerogative, impregnated the poor priestess, and she gave birth to a couple of little boys named Romulus and Remus. And of course, this was a big no-no, because she wasn't supposed to be having no kids. So the kids were taken away from her and tossed in the river and washed out to sea to die. It seemed like a popular thing to do at the time. If there were any unwanted kids, you just kind of take them out in the middle of nowhere and leave them there. And death is called death by exposure. That is, to exposure to the elements, wind, rain, cold, starvation, exposure to wild animals, I suppose. Kind of an out of sight, out of mind kind of thing, It sounds harsh, but it seemed, from what I read, it seemed pretty common in that day and age. Anyways, the children were assumed dead, but they didn't die. They were suckled and nursed back to health by a wolf, a she-wolf, as legend tells it. And then they grew up and came back and avenged their father and killed Amulius and founded a little town, a little village that they decided to call Rome on the Palatine Hill. Now, this is a significant place to found a town because Rome is famous for having 7 hills, and the Palatine Hill is one of them. Now, Romulus and Remus got into a little fight, maybe about, I'm just hypothesizing here about what to call the city. Maybe Romulus was like, yeah, it's definitely going to be called Rome, and Remus was like, no, we should call it Rheims. Anyways, Romulus killed Remus and became Rome's first king. And there are little architectural remains and evidences of this village of Romulus from around 753 BCE. It was just a bunch of little huts with thatch roofs and wood pole walls made out of something called wattle and daub, which is like kind of a mud kind of like smash a bunch of mud onto the stick walls. And it wasn't a glorious thing. During these centuries, Rome was not a glorious place at all because the nearby Etruscans and Greeks overshadowed them a great deal. But they started having kings and doing things. There was a bunch of kings called the Tarquins. The last king, his name was called Tarquinius Superbus. Pretty cool name, this Superbus guy. But he was too much of a king. He was downright tyrannical. People didn't like him very much, but he did make a cool temple called the Temple of Jupiter, Optimus, Maximus. They had cool names back then, you gotta admit. This is also a temple commonly known as the Capitolium, and it was huge. Probably one of the biggest temples ever made back then, even bigger than like the Pantheon. And the problem was it was made of wood, and so it kept on burning down. So we don't really know much about it. Like there's no remains of it today, just some maybe foundation marks, and we have writings about it. But it was a very Etruscan temple in its proportions, and it had 3 inner rooms for 3 different gods, Jupiter and Juno and Minerva. But anyways, this king got overthrown in 509 BCE, and after that 250 years of Roman kings and Roman kingdom was over, and the Romans decided, hey, let's do it differently. How about a republic? Let's elect a senate, huh? Let's have 2 consuls instead of the monarch. Let's have a little thing called, division of power. Yeah. The Senate was pretty much just made up of rich old men from wealthy old Roman families who sat around and discussed things. And it's pretty elitist, but I guess slightly less elitist than having a tyrannical king. Anyways, so from then on, Rome kind of went on a tear and started conquering all the people around them. They went north and east and west and south, even across the Mediterranean to Carthage. And there wasn't much backlash except for around 390 BCE when the Gauls walked into Rome and sacked it and wouldn't leave until Rome gave them 1,000 pounds of gold. And after that, the Romans thought, we should probably build a wall around our city. So they built something called we now call the Servian walls. It's misnamed after someone that lived much earlier. But these are cool walls because they're 12 feet thick, 30 feet high, and 7.5 miles long, going around the 7 Hills area of Rome. And they're made of cut stone blocks without any masonry. So this is a pretty crazy wall. I mean, there have been crazier walls, but it took them, probably took them like, from the dates I have written here, it took them like 8 years to build it. Yeah, so they didn't want to be attacked by Gauls anymore. And they kept building walls around some other cities that they founded. And I have a bunch of notes here about, there's too much to go over, about all these temples they were building. And there was all these mixes of Etruscan and Greek influences, and how they kind of absorbed ideas from both civilizations and made them their own, and how things gradually became distinctly Roman, right? Maybe they wanted to, they would take some columns and they started doing things this way or that way, but never completely one way or the other. So a lot of the times Roman generals, before they went off to war, they'd make a big speech in front of the populace saying, hey, I'm going to go off to war, and if I'm victorious, I'm going to come back with all the war booty I collect, and I'm going to come back with all this newfound riches and wealth. I'm going to build a crazy big new temple for all of you. Okay, won't that be cool? And everyone's like, yeah, that'll be awesome. And then so often, it seems like that's exactly what happened. They would come back and build a cool new temple or sanctuary or something. Yeah. Now, an interesting thing I learned about the Corinthian capitals, because there's, if you've studied art or architecture or anything like this, you've probably had some section, on the various capitals. There's the Doric, the Ionic, the Corinthian. There's a couple of others, the Tuscan, etc. But the Corinthian capitals seem like they were kind of made to solve a problem that existed with both the Doric and the Ionic. Because the Greeks had all these very specific rules, right, that they weren't allowed to break when they were using these columns, these orders they were called. But the problem was a lot of these rules were self-conflicting. For example, the Ionic columns were they had these volutes on top, which were like inverted scrolls, and these had a distinct front and back, right? And so, of course, you'd want the front poking out the front, and this posed a problem for the corners of buildings. Like, what do you do on the corner? Because on the sides of the buildings, you want the front of the scrolls pointing out too, and you don't want some weird thing going on there, and they were just struggling with it. Sometimes they would have like a double-faced scroll, and it just looked kind of goofy, and they weren't ever really completely happy with it. And the Doric columns, they were much simpler, but above the columns, there's this band, part of the roof, called a frieze, and there's this pattern of spaces and 3 vertical bars that goes along the frieze called triglyphs and I think metopes or something like that. It'd be like boom, 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 boom. So you have 3 bars. The rule was you have these 3 bars called a triglyph right over the column every time. Over each column you'd have to have a triglyph, right? And also right perfectly spaced in between each column you had to have another triglyph. This was the rule. But also, at the corner of the roof on the frieze, the triglyphs had to meet without any space. But this is where the problem was, because the columns weren't far enough out under the roof for the triglyphs to both meet without any space and to be directly over the columns. So no one was really completely happy with these rules and the lack of solutions until they came up with the Corinthian order. Because the Corinthian order just had all these, this is the really fancy looking one with all the acanthus leaves and the crazy vines and stuff like that. The nice thing about this one was that it has 4 sides, right? It didn't have a distinct front and back. So it looked okay, whether it was on the front or on the corner or on the side. And it uses the frieze, the band on top right above the columns, without the pattern of triglyphs and metopes. You could just put some cool patterns up there, maybe some bulls or some little, garlands or, maybe whatever you want. But it didn't have to be a weirdly perfectly spaced pattern in the same way. Anyways, that was interesting. Anyways, starting around the 2nd century, a cool thing you started to see in these Roman temples was Roman concrete. And I was looking at the pictures in the history textbook, and I was looking at it, and I was like, where is the concrete? I don't see it. And this is before I read further, because at first glance, it doesn't look like concrete, and it's not the same kind of concrete that we have today. The first kind of concrete they came up with was called opus incurtum, maybe. I don't know. My Latin's a little rusty. In fact, almost non-existent. But that means uncertain work. Basically, they'd make 2 facings. If they wanted to make a concrete wall, they'd make 2 facings of bricks and then pour the concrete in between them. For opus incertum, it would be just a bunch of irregular stones with all the They would find a smooth face for each stone and put it on the outside. So it'd be a pretty smooth wall. And then all of that would get covered in stucco or something to make it would imitate the look of a nice marble Greek temple. If you went to any of these sites today, any of the surviving ones, they don't look like that because all the stucco is gone. It looks like a kind of a rough patchwork of similarly sized bricks. So the same appearance isn't there. But if you kind of back up and blur your eyes, you get all the shapes and features. But this really kind of revolutionized their architectural thinking and what they were able to do, because it was much cheaper than having to cut each piece of stone to fit together. That's something called ashlar masonry, hand shaping each stone, or having to quarry it from somewhere far away and ship it in. So much more time consuming and expensive. And sometimes they could make these cool, they started using all these amazing barrel vaults, which are just basically tunnels with curved ceilings, and they could use, they made annular barrel vaults. Cool words. I've been learning a lot of cool words like annular barrel vaults and excedra, which are like semicircular colonnades. But they can make molds to pour the concrete into for some of these things, right? And then take the molds away once it had hardened. Anyways, yeah, I don't know. So there's been a lot of cool stuff, and then I don't know. I should probably stop now because it's getting kind of long. But a whole other section of the section we learned this week was all about the Roman domus, which is where we get the word domestic, the Roman house. And that's very interesting. And it's also a little weird because so much of it is about, the Roman house. But I wonder what percentage of the population lived in these Roman houses that we're learning about. So many of these that we study that exist, of course, are from Pompeii and the surrounding towns, because these are the only ones that got preserved, because, when Vesuvius got erupted and covered the town in ash and lava and whatnot, and I think that was 79 AD. But it makes me wonder, I think this was mostly just the 1% that lived in these houses, and everyone else lived probably in cramped little apartments or something, or I don't know. But I guess it's a art class and not an anthropology or sociology class, so I shouldn't worry too much about it. But I guess, I don't know, it's a little frustrating sometimes to have so much emphasis put on the stuff from rich people, but I guess that's the stuff that lasted through the centuries, because everyone else was just busy surviving, making it day to day, while the rich people were able to, put their time and effort into filling their houses with all this amazing art, and being like, hey, I want to spend all my money on just putting these crazy pillars in my house and these weird sculptures and this amazing mosaic with 1,000,000 stones. So I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a lot more to talk about, but I got to cut myself off. All right. Goodbye. Hope you all have a good day. Take it easy. I just got finished mowing the lawn, which went pretty good. It felt good. It was a good, solid lawn mow. And every time I mow my lawn, I feel a little bit victorious that my lawnmower is still working great, because I don't know if you remember this, but I talked about when I first bought this lawnmower, the guy who sold it to me was pretty much telling me, he was not trying to sell me the lawnmower, but he was trying to sell me a warranty, like a $75 warranty for a $200 lawnmower. He was really trying to sell me the warranty so much that he ended up really telling me how awful the lawnmower was and how quickly it was going to break, that it would only last for 3 mows, right? Which was weird, because I've never had a salesman tell me how bad the product is. It was just an odd experience. Anyways, but I was like, no, I'm not going to buy your stupid warranty. The thing's going to work fine. which I think it has partly because I use the ethanol-free gas. And anyways, it's been working for like a year or two now. I don't mow that often. Probably not as often as I should, or that my landlord wishes I would, but I do, and it works great. And I've only dinged the blades on roots and bits of curb a couple times, so all right, see y'all later. Goodbye. I forgot to breathe for a while there. I'll see you later.